Hello, my name is Oliver Ward and this is my EP presentation about designing and building a plane. So first thing, why did I choose this project then? Well, one major factor was the fact that I have a great interest in aviation and everything related to that topic, like the flying itself as well as the aircraft and the engineering behind them. From this then, I'd already decided that I wanted to study aeronautical engineering at university, which looked at designing and building aircraft. So from these two factors, I had a specific area that I wanted to look at. So when it came to the start of the project, I brainstormed lots more ideas onto mind maps to look at all my options with an open mind, but came to the same conclusion that I wanted to look at this topic due to my interest in it, and it'd be incredibly beneficial to what I want to do in the future as it uses some very similar skills and principles. One thing that I'd realised right at the start of the project was that it required a lot of different areas of research and development to come together correctly, meaning I'd have to be careful on how I managed and organised everything. I decided to create a mind map at the start to look at all the different parts of the project that I'd need to work on to get it completed, detailing all 4 parts. I constructed multiple timelines throughout to refine my deadlines for the different parts of the project. As well as this, in my log, I had a column to plan what I wanted and also needed to get done next time, which gave me a clear direction for me to work in. Once I'd planned the structure of the project and my way of completing it, I started working on arguably the largest part of this all, the research. I had to research and analyse a large range of topics, such as the legal requirements to flying large RC aircraft, the electrical engineering of all the parts and how to get them working, and most significantly of all, the aerodynamic research, looking at how the wings generate lift and also customising the aerofoils for certain behaviours that I wanted my aircraft to have. Once I had the knowledge of how to design and build all the different aspects of the plane, I started brainstorming ideas for actually designing, for example looking at the landing gear layout, if it be high wing or low wing, where the engines would be and how many I wanted. To complete this, I used different sketches, mind maps and also looked at actual aircraft, both real and models, like the one shown above for ideas and inspiration for my design. Now I had my design specification, detailing that I wanted a strong, easy to handle training aircraft, I could start designing. I started with the electrics, getting the aircraft weight to be about 1 kilogram, and after finding parts and some phone calls to model shops for the help, I then ordered the parts so that they would get delivered whilst they came up with the designs. Starting with the wing, I came up with an aerofoil shape from initial sketches, and then figured out how to make it strong. Once I was done, I then designed the rest of the aircraft itself from multiple scale drawings, showing all the structural parts inside it. Finally, I then used my estimated kilogram weight to determine the size of the wings and the stabilizers. Now that I had all the parts and the designs together, I could start building. I started off with the wing, building from the aluminium spars which gave the wing strength, fitted the wing electronics and controls first, as I wouldn't be able to access them once the wing surface was on, and then adding the ribs before finally fitting the material to the wing and adding the control surfaces. Then I built the rear stabilizers, added the control surfaces to them, and then attached everything onto the fuselage, also made out of aluminium. Once I was happy all the structural components were firmly attached, I then finished all the wiring and fitted the electrics, and then put the motor onto the front firewall of the aircraft. An important part of any aircraft construction is testing, and therefore this is something that I carried out lots of. Before installing the electrics into the aircraft, I put the electronics required for the motor to run on a wooden trolley to test the motor. It worked excellently. However, the propeller did hit the ground and damage it, meaning I had to replace it, otherwise it would be dangerous. When the electrics were in the aircraft, I then tested all the flight controls and steering, and then took it for a ground run test to confirm everything worked. At this point I noticed I set the steering arms the wrong way, meaning it turned the opposite way that I wanted, so I fixed that before I continued. It happened to be a very windy day that day, and as I couldn't fly it yet due to not having the legal documents to do so, I held it up in the wind gusts. I could feel it trying to fly out my hands, so it meant despite not being able to do a proper flight yet, it ultimately meant I succeeded with the design and that it does fly. Throughout the project, I've certainly faced a fair amount of issues. Firstly, whilst creating the aircraft, I've had materials that have broken whilst working on them. Namely, whilst creating the horizontal stabilizer, the rear spar snapped, but I was able to glue them together. And even though it weakened the bending strength, it retained the majority of its torsion strength, which was what I required it for. Also, whilst gluing the wing material on, the hot glue melted through the material, so I had to scrap that piece, and then unplug the glue gun for a few minutes every so often before using it, so it was hot enough to use but wouldn't melt the material, and repeat that to strike a balance between the two. In the testing phase, when I was testing the elevator, it was too heavy for the servo to move and stalled it. That meant that I had no option but to get a significantly more powerful servo, whilst of course checking it still run on the same equipment. Also, at the end, I weighed the aircraft and it came in at over 2 kilograms, considerably heavier than planned for, meaning that the motor may be too underpowered and require upgrading. Looking back through the project now, I've seen how important the planning is and keeping to time schedules, as it allows you to have spare time if needed. This is where I went wrong. I'd spent too much time researching and then not enough time building the aircraft, meaning I had very little time to troubleshoot, particularly considering I had to wait for a considerable time for extra parts. However, as seen from the skills wheel that I'd created, all of my skills have improved significantly, particularly surrounding designing skills, researching, and referencing skills. I would say I've done well with developing everything and learning so much, not only about the designing process of my aircraft, but also the skills building used in it. Despite not being able to properly fly it yet, my design works in that it does create enough lift to fly, tested in the wind, and is a strong structure, meaning that ultimately I feel like I've succeeded in what I originally set out to do and learnt much more from it. As well as this, not only have I been very efficient when building the plane with materials, but I've also managed to solve some major issues along the way with the build process, resulting in what I believe is a great aircraft. Furthermore, I'd say despite slipping behind my time schedule, my planning has allowed me to make the most efficient use of time as possible, maximising my time working on the aircraft. As previously mentioned, however, the extra time spent on the research resulting in the delayed project meant I was therefore very tight for time towards the end of the project. Also, I haven't yet managed to get it to fly properly, which was originally one of my goals, due to the fact that to fly it legally it needs to be registered to someone who's over 18 and ended up not being able to get that completed. If I had to do the project next time, I think I'd make sure I strictly followed to the schedule to allow me to stay on track and not run low on time. Also, I think that I would build the aircraft structure first and then decide what electrics I want in the aircraft so I can tailor the equipment to it better, like getting a more powerful motor. Thank you very much for watching my presentation.